everybody knows this is Edvard Munch's famous portrait, The Scream, and I think a lot of people feel this way, service providers feel this way, even property managers, when working with compulsive hoarders, right? Does this sound familiar, look familiar? Obviously, it's very stigmatized, and it can tax your mind, body, and soul working with individuals with these issues. So hopefully today we'll hear how to work with them and how to hopefully manage the problems. So a couple of things. It is a fairly new field. It started about 15 years ago, and it's really looking at it as a separate and distinct issue from OCD. As we all know, it is a difficult behavior to stop, like other kinds of addictive behaviors like substance abuse. It's purported around 5% of Americans have compulsive hoarding problems. That number is much higher in supportive housing. From my just cursory studies of just talking to people, it seems about 7 to 8%. We all know some very famous hoarders. Oscar the Grouch from Sesame Street. He lives in a garbage can, okay? So William Randolph Hearst, there's the Citizen Kane movie about him, and the age-old saying that if you're rich, you're eccentric, and if you're poor, you have mental health problems, right? Andy Warhol, the famous artist, actually had some problems with this issue, although he called it art, A lot of people do that. There does seem to be a connection between trauma and hoarding, but there's no correlation between class and hoarding, and hopefully Jerry will expand on all this stuff. Demographics, average age is 50. Marital status is a shocker, tends to be single. High divorce rates. They do tend to be creative, tend to live alone. There's often a history of hoarding in the family, and now it's generally known now to be genetic. People are realizing that there are some genetic causes. It usually starts around the age of 13. There is no evidence or causation between material deprivation and hoarding, although that's some issue that we could see from people that have, who have been formerly homeless. Sometimes they have behaviors that maybe look like hoarding, but may not be. Hoarding definitely worsens, like most mental health issues, with trauma and loss. Insight tends to be low, but not totally low. I mean, if you watch some of the movies, there are a lot of people that know that they have issues, but they just can't stop because it's an addictive behavior. 60% suffer from clinical depression, usually due to their compulsive hoarding problems. And in one study, close to 70% reported having at least one traumatic event in their life. And yet, some people say that, at least this study shows that sometimes the hoarding behavior could help people not get PTSD, which kind of makes sense. So they do the hoarding, they have one problem, but it stops them from getting at least more traumatized by other events. So that's kind of interesting. 20% do suffer from obsessive compulsive disorders, and Jerry is an expert on that, so he could talk a little bit more about that. Many compulsive hoarders, and of course these are generalizations, but a lot of them are highly intelligent, very creative people, but also report being raised by a lot of cold, critical parents. So there's a lot of ambivalent feelings about their self-worth. Some of them, not all, but some of them have these rigid ideas of perfection, a fear of throwing things away or wasting an opportunity. You see a piece of wood on the ground. For most of us, that's a piece of garbage. But for them, it could be an opportunity to make something out of it, art, fix something else. There's a lot of guilt and shame and ambivalent feelings around their self-worth and self-doubt. So you can see immediately when you hear the word ambivalence, one thing that should come to mind, at least if you're a clinician, is motivational interviewing, which is going to help. So again, many hoarders are highly intelligent, creative people. Again, this fear of wasting things does play into going green oftentimes these days. I don't want to throw this away, and we got to save the planet, and, well, I'll save it, We're not going to really talk too much about animal hoarding today, but that's the Dr. Dolittle syndrome. People talk to the animals. So a lot of them have difficulty staying on task. So you can see ADHD, ADD issues, paying attention, again, fear of waste, trouble making decisions. Many of them have this elaborative processing where they answer a 1-minute question in 20 minutes. A lot of them don't trust their memories, which is why they need things out in the open. So putting things away is like it's just lost forever. A lot of motivational issues, some avoidant behavior. And of course, this is the Collier brothers. Many of us in New York City know them or have heard about them. So they were the first people to really bring hoarding to the consciousness of the American public. And, of course, now when there's a hoarding situation, the fire department will say we have a Collier situation on our hands. Incidentally, where they used to live is now a park in Harlem named after them. It's Collier Brother Park, and this is their home. This is where they lived, booby-trapped inside. When the police broke down the door, they found both of them dead. It took them about 10 days to find one of the brothers under the pile of rubbish. Lots of crazy things in here. Actually, there was E.L. Doctorow wrote a book recently about a fictionalized version of the Collier brothers, Homer and Langley it's called. So many of us collect for all the same reasons that people with compulsive hoarding issues collect things. It has sentimental value, or it has utility to us, or we just think, people think it's just nice looking and they want to keep it. My wife, if you asked her, she would say, I'm a hoarder. But I'm not. I'm here to tell you I'm a collector. And this is my... That's right. This is one of my bookshelves in my home. There's 3 or 4 others. People always ask me, have you read all the books? And the answer is yes. It's mostly history books. But anyhow, does this look like hoarding? No, it's not. Yes. How dare you? Organized hoarding. Okay. I'll give you that.
I have a card for you.
Thanks. I need help. If I've spent all of my money on books and I couldn't pay my mortgage and couldn't feed my kids, then yes, I would be a hoarder. But none of those things happen. Well, they might. Could get worse as I get older. All right, so now we're getting into what it looks like. And, of course, these are extreme hoarding situations. So not every tenant in your building hopefully doesn't have a room like this. But there is a cat here crying out, please help me, dear God. There's another cat up here, too. But you wouldn't want to eat or cook or do anything in this room, right? More pictures. Obviously, a lot of compulsive hoarders like plastic bags. Some of them could tell you exactly where everything is in this room. And then others would just lose everything. But there could be wads of cash in some of these plastic bags or a diamond ring or something. And when you do a deep cleaning and you throw all this away, obviously that severs the relationship and oftentimes could lead to suicidal tendencies, suicidal ideation, so you want to be careful with deep cleaning. We'll probably get into that later on. This is my desk at my office. I'm just kidding. It's not. But I have hoarding material over the years. Thankfully, a lot of it's on our F drive and not on my desk. A lot of people like to collect newspapers, right? You've probably seen these stacks of newspapers in your tenant's room. And, of course, they'd say, What's the deal with the stack of newspapers? There's something in there I want to read, right? And, of course, in every one of those pieces of paper, there's something they want to read. Very time-consuming to cut it out and try to deal with the pile. Obviously, a big health hazard as well, safety hazard, fire hazard. Another room where the bookshelves are kind of neatly stacked, which is kind of interesting. Now, we'll go through these really quickly and then get to the panel. See, in the beginning, there's no evidence of hoarding. Then the beginning of a problem. These are pictures by Randy Frost, who's the preeminent scholar on hoarding, along with Jerry. Then some mild compulsive hoarding. Stop me when you see where your tenants are. All right, moderate. Keep going. All right. Serious. Okay, so the serious is not fun. Very serious. Okay, if we get to the last frame, then you just should give up. But severe, that's not good. You see that, Jerry?
You never give up.
Never give up, right. Very severe. And then you have extreme hoarding, which is a giant mound. So let's listen to a hoarder speak about their own issues. I feel that if I finally get rid of my piles that fill the rooms in my house and garage, I will die. I know it's not true, but I feel that way. If I throw too much away, there will be nothing left of me. So it's kind of like an extension of another appendage, like another arm. And if you throw the stuff away, it's like cutting off their arm, which is obviously severe feelings towards their stuff. This is Dr. Randy Frost, and this is probably what's going to be in the next DSM-5 when it comes out. So here are the 3 components. Compulsive acquisition, buying or acquiring free things or just, buying cheap things. And then, of course, saving for all the reasons we talked about earlier. And then these are other facets of compulsive hoarding, which are random piles, fear of putting things out of sight, which I mentioned earlier, indecision, and churning. That's when you tell your tenants to get ready for an apartment inspection, and they go upstairs huffing and puffing, and they do 5 hours of work. They come downstairs, and you say, all right, let's go take a look. And you go in there, and it looks worse. Or the same. That's called churning, just moving piles around because they have no way to organize their stuff because they have trouble with that. Then there's the clutter blindness as well. They can't see that this stuff is a problem. So Randy Frost talks about being clutter blind. So there are 4 different types, at least that I recollect in hoarding. Common hoarding, which is kind of what we've been seeing. OCD-based hoarding would be kind of like the neat hoarders that have more OCD issues. And those people tend to not like the hoarding. It causes a lot of distress in them. Other people, the other diagnoses, they tend to, they get an emotional rile out of it. It's enjoyable. And then again, it also causes a lot of problems as well. So it's both things. But in OCD, they usually are not. They usually don't like it. Diogenes syndrome is very severe, cases where this is where it gets kind of repugnant. But they're hoarding feces and living in squalor, and oftentimes that could happen with the elderly due to mobility issues, cognitive issues, and things like that. Animal hoarding, as I mentioned, is we've all seen what that looks like. You have the 10 bunny rabbits living in your house, and then you have 500 because they're bunny rabbits, because they're rabbits. That's what they do. We don't usually see that much of a problem in supportive housing, so we usually will just go over animal hoarding. This is the kinds of things that people like to collect: newspapers, papers, containers, clothing, food, and trash. I did skip over the books. It's too close to home. And then, of course, if you are familiar with the stages of change, we talk about using the stages of change to really talk about hoarding. Same kinds of things. People are in denial, or they're not aware of their problem. Then you do the contemplation things, which is really weighing the pros and cons and then getting them ready. There's a lot of, we're getting close to an evidence-based practice soon that Randy Frost has a sort of a program. So this is what you would want to do using the stage of change. People are actively hoarding, either in pre-contemplation or contemplation. You want to weigh the pros and cons. What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? And then do the same thing with what if you stop hoarding, what kinds of issues would you have? What would be good about it? What would be bad about it? Again, that's straight out of like motivational interviewing. We won't dwell on that, but we could talk about it. Here are the top 10 signs that you may have a hoarding problem. Client keeps part of their home off limits. Client insists on meeting you in their office. Client puts off repairs. Client often fails to pay bills. Client is in debt due to compulsive shopping. Client discusses their stuff endlessly. Trying to declutter small areas is a major task. Client has trouble finding things and resists storing things out of sight. See, I have that problem. I'll admit it. Storage areas are overflowing. Client doesn't let you touch his or her possessions. So those are some signs. And then, of course, finding help is another big issue. There's not many programs that I'm aware of in New York City, but there is on the OCD Foundation website, you can hone in on some of these places. Finding a good therapist is important. Hoarding support groups. And then I've heard this, that tenants have seen these shows on TV, and have gone up to the room and cleaned their rooms because they're like, I don't want to be like that. So that could be something interesting.